Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So as a foundation and a basis for our conversation here today about this very important issue and very troubling situation that the community finds itself in, as a premise and a foundation for this conversation, I'd like to use an ayah of the Qur'an. An ayah of the Qur'an that is really remarkable in the sense that it is placed, of course, divinely and therefore perfectly at the conclusion of a very remarkable surah that has a very great diversity of different topics and discussions within it. And it is at the conclusion of a surah, and the next surah that basically goes forward talks a lot about turmoil and turbulence and difficulty that ends up occurring within the lives of people. First and foremost, while I'm there at that particular topic, one of the things that we do have to grasp, and a lot of how we process information and the culture that we are a product of, admittedly, a lot of times there's a lot of negativity when we talk about this issue. And while there are a lot of negative aspects to it, but I don't mean to mention this negatively. Just we need to at the same time learn to grasp reality. What is the reality of our situation? Who are we? What is our context? What has constructed our psyche and our, understanding of the world that we live in, and how we process information, and how we process the experiences that we go through? And a lot of what has impacted and constructed our psyche and approach to the world around us is a very short-sighted, narrow-minded focus on the immediate. What is immediately going on around us and in front of us and with us. And almost an obsession with that. And there is a disconnect from all the things that have transpired before us and what humanity and society has gone through for centuries and millennia. There's a disconnect from that. And so what ends up happening is that, and this is very common dialogue, this is very, very common rhetoric. So tell me if it sounds familiar. The ummah is more persecuted today than it has ever been before. Sound familiar? Absolutely. Completely false. Absolutely false. It's ridiculous. The arrogance of that statement is so just astounding that just leaves you speechless. For us to be so arrogant that it's bad enough that in our own lives, socially, personally, psychologically, emotionally, we live our lives in a way where I'm the center of the universe. But then collectively, we've been able to take our generation of the ummah and say all of Islam revolves around us. We are Islam. As if there was no Islam before us, there was no ummah before us, there were no Muslims before us, and there will never be any after us. Right here. It starts here, it ends here. It is us. It is just pure arrogance. Just read. Like a lot of times jokingly, you tell your friend, you're like, read a book, right? We, collectively as an ummah, need to read a book. It's called the Seerah, it's called the Life of the Prophet ﷺ. And if you pick up and you read that book, you know what you would find? You would find that there were a few dozen Muslims living in the largest, most important city in the Arabian Peninsula at that time that had an established culture and religion and political system and power structure and authority and financial system. And all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5 dozen people decided they weren't down with the program no more. They were not going to be a part of this anymore. We believe in something different. We worship a different way. We will live with a different set of values. We will conduct ourselves differently. We will walk and talk differently. Just 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 people. In the biggest, most influential, most powerful, most important city and tribe in the Arabian Peninsula at that time. And that's it. There's only 40 Muslims on the face of the planet. And they were being picked off one by one by one. 40 Muslims being picked off one after another, after another, after another. Like Zinnira radiallahu ta'ala anha, she comes to mind. A slave woman who was in Makkah at that time, heard the message of Islam. It struck her, resonated with her. She became Muslim, accepted Islam. When her slave owner, master, whatever you want to call it, found out that she had accepted Islam, was outraged. So basically subjected her to all types of terrible torture. And they tortured her to the point, she was an elderly woman, they tortured her to the point of blindness. She went blind. She lost her eyesight. And after she lost her eyesight, she could no longer see. Then one of the ways that they used to torture her and kind of mock her and play games with her is that they would deprive her of food and water for a day, a couple of days, until she was at the point of just, starvation. And they would then bring some warm food or food specifically that had some type of aroma. And when they would bring it near her, she could smell the food because of hunger. So she would kind of come closer and they would hold it out in front of her and she would follow the smell till she got close enough and she would reach out with her hands and try to grab it or jump forward and try to take it. And then they would pull it away and she would fall down and then they would laugh at her. And this is how they treated her. Like, this is what was going on. Of course, it has a remarkable end where they do this and every day she tolerates it, whatever. Until one day, they really specifically start talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That look at your Allah and what can He do, and He can't do anything and He couldn't save you. And our idols and this and this and this. So they started mocking what she believed in. And that night she made dua and she said, "Oh Allah, they mock me, they make fun of me, they do whatever they want, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. But they talk about you in a way that I can't tolerate. So Allah, you prove them wrong." They come back in the morning and they find her untied, sitting there eating grapes and drinking water. They're like, "Who gave you this?" And she says, "What, this?" And they realize she's looking right at them. She can see. And they're like, "What, you can see? How?" And she said, "You talked about my Allah yesterday, didn't you?" "That's right. My Allah did this." So my point of telling the story was just to mention the fact there are 40 Muslims on the face of the planet being picked off one after another. They are hiding. They are trying to escape with their lives. Eventually they have to leave their homes and migrate to East Africa and live there as migrants, as refugees, barely surviving. So I go back to the initial point that this arrogance that we have about ourselves Oh, the ummah is more in distress than it has ever been before. Slow your roll. And that is not to minimize the suffering of people. No. Don't misunderstand me. My point is, if we're sitting here for the purpose of analysis, empathy, empathize completely with whoever is struggling. But if we're sitting here for the purposes of analysis, then please develop a sense of some context. That this is not the first time in the ummah's history that the ummah is struggling or suffering. Because we can also turn around and say the ummah has never been as wealthy as it is today. The ummah has never been as numerous as it is today. The ummah has never been as educated as it is today. The ummah has never been in a better position than it is today. That is also similarly then a point of contention and discussion. So context is very, very important. I kind of felt the necessity of mentioning that. But what I really want to talk about here is the ayah. That's where I started this entire discussion. A very remarkable ayah, verse of the Qur'an, that occurs at the end of a very powerful surah that talks about what we believe in and why we believe what we believe. And it is right before the beginning of a surah that talks about turmoil, turbulence, and conflict within the lives of those people who now believe. It is ayah number 199. Ayah number 199 of surah number 7, which we call Surah Al-A'raf. Right before we have Surah Al-Anfal, which talks about war. So ayah number 199 of surah number 7. I'm going to read the ayah for you. I want you to marvel at the brevity and the conciseness of the ayah. خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. That is the ayah. The ayah has 3 portions. Before I translate, the ayah has 3 portions. خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. And I'd like to break down these 3 parts. So bear with me, inshallah. The first part is خُذِ الْعَفْوَ. 2 words. The first word is khud. Khud in the Arabic language means to take something. But not just to pick up something, but it means like to snatch, like almost like take and grab and hold on to something. Khud. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the prophets in the Qur'an, Ya Yahya, khudil kitaba bi quwwatin. Khud. So it means to grab something, hold something, and then hold on to it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says khud, it's the command form, which is the classical Arabic method of commanding or instructing someone to implement something as a policy. See, when you do something once or twice, this is a one-off type of thing, that's not called khud, like taking something. But taking something, holding on to it, means adopting it as a policy, making it the norm, making it the standard operating procedure, SOP. That's what khud means. To make something your default, your standard operating procedure, modus operandi. That's what it refers to. And so that's what it's saying. Khud, take, hold on to. Implement as a policy. What? Al-afwa. The second word is al-afwa. Al-afwa in the Arabic language means to let something go. To forgive. To overlook. To dismiss. You know, when somebody does something wrong and somebody wants to, reprimand them and take it very seriously and kind of get on their case about it, and you end up telling that brother, you say like, you know what, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Let it go. It's okay. I know he's late to his session, but let it go. It's okay. Right? So you tell somebody it's okay. Let it go. Don't worry about it. No problem. No big deal. That's al-afwa. It's okay. Don't worry about it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, khudh al-afwa. That type of attitude of letting things go, accommodating faults and shortcomings, like accepting them, dismissing them, overlooking shortcomings and faults, make that your standard operating procedure. That should be your default mode. That you do not jump on the case of each and every single person that slightly deviates from the exact operating manual and procedure. Hey, why are you sitting like this? Why are you doing that? Who told you to do that? Why'd you send that email? Why'd you make that phone call? You're not supposed to do it like this. Why'd you put it in this box? No, it goes in that box. You don't do anything right. Didn't you read the email that I sent? Don't you guys know how to follow rules? Didn't you people learn how to read? Didn't your mother love you? Right? It's like, well, why do you get so personal? Right? That's what happens when you get angry. You get angrier. Right? That's why it's not good. But my point is simply that we sometimes think that we mistake, we use these words, we talk about professionalism, and we talk about being sophisticated and refined and developed and professional and being proficient and et cetera, et cetera. We talk about all these things. We want to make what we do better. And we sometimes mistake that for, we misunderstand that for like absolute perfection. That is total garbage. Absolute perfection in what you do is garbage. That doesn't even exist. Human beings were not created with the ability to be perfect. That is a philosophical fallacy. The Prophet ﷺ in a hadith, he says, "Kullu bani Adam khata." This is what we call in the Arabic language, what we call a jumla khabariya, which means it is an informative, factual statement. The Prophet ﷺ saying, every human being will always make mistakes. Every human being makes mistakes. There is no such thing as perfection. So don't go around demanding perfection from people. But when people make mistakes, overlook their faults. Let things go. Number 2, wa'mur bil 'urf. Let's just say you gave somebody a task 9 times. And all 9 times they did it wrong. Every single time. Every single time. Then, khudil afwa. Right? You're trying to learn. So you gave them the task a 10th time. With a gentle reminder. This is how we do it. And they do it right. The 10th time. The 10th time, he or she finally got it right. Now, what is the reaction that usually you want to have in that situation? When that person comes and says, hey, look, I got it right. You want to say, oh my God, that's amazing. I was convinced you were a moron. But apparently you can be taught something. Hold on, let me go and call my parents. Let me put out an announcement. You got it right. Congratulations. After 9 times you got it right. You want to have that reaction. And that probably initially will play out in your head. But keep it to yourself. Wa'mur bil 'urf. Enjoin positively. With good. What that means is reinforce, recognize, acknowledge the good that people do in a positive manner and fashion. Recognize them. When that dude, all right, comes back the 10th time, finally having done it right after 9 incorrect tries, and says, look, I got it, I did it right. Then at that time you say, mashallah, jazakallah khair, thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much. And acknowledge that person, praise that person, thank that person, say jazakallah to that person for doing it right. positively reinforce, and that will lead towards building and encouraging more, positive behavior and positive achievements. But the last and the final part of this equation is that if that's how you're operating, why am I talking about this? This doesn't have to seem to do anything with the topic. It does. No, I'm just joking. It does. But the idea is that, look, challenges and difficulties have always been there, are there, and will always be there. If you're looking for a place where all of a sudden magically we're all just skipping around, holding hands, eating hummus, and everybody's happy and Muslim, that doesn't exist. That's called paradise, minus the hummus, right? But that doesn't exist. Medina. Do you understand? I know I'm going back to the earlier point that I made, but I really feel like I need to drive this point home because from my experience, from my interaction and my dialogue with the Muslim community today, the Ummah today has a very hard time grasping that its struggles are a part of the equation. People disagreeing with you are supposed to be there. Abdullah bin Mas'ud said that if you don't find anyone to ever disagree with you, then know that you're probably compromising your religion. You're supposed to have people not like you. And you're supposed to continue to try to give them a reason to like you. True. But don't be shocked and worried and be crying and screaming your plight and, oh, the Ummah. Oh, us. No, there's always been struggles. In Medina, while the Prophet ﷺ is there, hypocrites were present. Can you imagine? We hear the name Muhammad ﷺ and our eyes well up with tears. I just hear the name Muhammad and I get ready to cry. That man means so much to me. Just to be able to be in his presence and see him and shake his hand and never let go. I'd be that weird guy that just wouldn't let go of his hand. He's like, I'd be the guy with the 8-minute hug. Right? I can't even process the feeling and the emotion of actually being in his presence. Standing in front of him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, can you imagine somebody not only shaking his hand and hugging him and being there in front of him, but praying behind him? SubhanAllah. Listening to him, being a direct recipient of the Qur'an and the Hadith from his mouth, and then to still be a covert disbeliever and a hypocrite, be like, this guy, ajib. It's it doesn't process for me. But there were hypocrites even in Medina. When we were there for Umrah earlier this year. And one of the things that, I kind of just realized at that moment, and I kind of pointed out to the group, because we were taking a walk through Al-Baqi', the graveyard. And a lot of the graves are not known, but some of the graves are known. Right? That this Sahabi is here, and that Sahabi is there, and the wives of the Prophet ﷺ are there, and the children of the Prophet ﷺ are there. Uthman ibn Affan is here, and so on and so forth. And then I kind of stopped and I told the group, I said, and do you also realize Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Sulul is also buried here? Which, for if somebody doesn't know, was the leader of the hypocrites and the leader of the opposition against the Prophet ﷺ. He used to curse the Prophet ﷺ. He used to mock the Messenger ﷺ. He made up rumors about the Prophet's wife. That man is buried in the same graveyard that his own family is buried in. There's always going to be difficulty. The reason why I talked about this ayah is how do we handle difficulty? Number one, have an easygoing attitude. Let it go. Let it roll off of you. Number two, when something good happens, recognize it, acknowledge it, and support it. I am tired of the negativity in our ummah. This session is talking about current events, right? Current events. I'm just going to say it. I don't care. this is broadcast or getting recorded, I just don't care anymore. I'm too old to care. So, I got hit up on Twitter by somebody, right? I guess it's a human being, that was kind of like, why aren't you talking about the refugees? And normally when I see a tweet like that, it doesn't bother me. I don't respond. I just block them and move on with my life. Right? The block button is your best friend. Takbir. Very good. Excellent. So I takbir myself. But normally that's how I operate. I don't know. I hadn't slept. I was hungry. I think I had just left for the airport from home. So I was already missing my kids. And I just wasn't in a good mood. It happens. Not proud of it, but I'm sharing the experience with y'all. Why aren't you talking about I don't see you talking about the refugees. And it's Saturday, and I'm kind of like, oh, I wonder what my khutbah was about yesterday. And my evening halaqah in my community, what it was about. Like you were there, obviously, right? That you're telling me I'm not talking about the refugee crisis because you obviously were at my khutbah in Arlington, Texas, and you were at my evening halaqah in Mansfield, Texas, that you are so authoritatively and conclusively stating the fact that I'm not addressing it or talking about it at all. And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't like your tone. And I responded by saying, Jazakallah khair, and then I blocked him. All right? I'm tired of negativity of the ummah. We do not have the ability to congratulate anyone or to recognize any type of a positive effort. Nothing. Nothing. I'm not saying congratulate me, but I'm pointing out my own problem. Do I reach out and congratulate you on the good accomplishments that you're doing? Or that you, whoever else it is. So number one, be easygoing. Don't let it bother you. Like that tweet bothered me, don't let it bother you. Number two, recognize good, positive efforts that are going on. Positively reinforce. Number three is, people always ask the question, what do you do about that one guy, though, that always gets negative? That one guy that always tweets you and says stupid stuff. And what I just told you, Allah says, وَأَعْرِضَ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ, ignore him. My tafsir of it, click the block button. Ignore them. I always tell people that when they say that, oh, we have this one really negative guy in our community who always is negative, I say, you have one guy, say, Alhamdulillah, I have two in my community. And they both hate each other more than anybody else. Right? But my point is that ignore the haters. Block the trolls. They're not good for anything. And that negative element was always there. If there could be a man standing in front of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, seeing the Qur'an being revealed and could still hate him, what are we so upset when there are people that don't like us or hate us? So ignore the haters. So what surah is this? Everybody please remind me. Huh? Surah Al-A'raf, surah number 7. What ayah number is it, everybody? 199. Jazakumullah khairan. Khudhil afwa wa'mur bil urfi wa'a'rid 'anil jahilin. Live by this principle. You'll never go wrong. May Allah accept from all of us. Jazakumullah khairan.